it's easy to take pot shots at corporate corruption, okay? So, my screen right now shows a picture of a BP tanker. It shows a picture of Iris Cross, who, if you saw this picture, you would instantly recognize because she was in 24-hour rotation in the United States. She was the, 40-ish year old, Gen X-ish African-American woman who BP put out in the front of all the community service messages in this region, or in the United States, really. And then there's a picture of the tanker blowing up and collapsing into the sea, okay? One doesn't have to look hard to find these examples, okay? They're headline-grabbing events. They draw negative attention to organizations. My contention is, if PR could aspire to be what Bowen hopes for, and is the ethical conscience of an organization, where was the PR council in the run-up to these crises? Second, once these crises occur, how is PR being used to dupe the public? Okay? So I was talking about BP with one of my very learned colleagues today, and I said, this woman, Iris Cross, I don't know her. I have nothing against her. She's just a person who works in PR. Though they don't call her a PR practitioner, of course, because they don't want people to have a negative impression of her. They call her title is VP Community Outreach. We all know what that means, right? Because we're trained in PR. The public doesn't know what that means. Her job is to present an image, right? And that's what we've been studying. Now, is it duplicitous for BP to use that image? That's a decision that you have to make. I weigh in on the line that that is evil. Okay? Where did this spill happen? The Gulf of Mexico? What states did it have the most consequence for? Louisiana, Mississippi, Florida, Alabama? What's the ethnic background? What's the racial profile of people in that band? Is it happenstance? Is it a coincidence that there were two figures? Okay, so the CEO took a loaded gun and shot himself in the foot with really stupid comments, right? Do we all remember that with BP? Hayward blew himself up, okay, got himself fired. So who do they trot out in front? Iris and a black man that I don't remember his name. These are symbols, right? Their race is being used by this corporation to present an image that people will trust. Now say that you're a shrimp boat captain, you're Forrest Gump and you're down on the bayou and you're eking out a living. This happens, your job's gone. And every time you come home after a 12-hour day of trying to eke out a living, you see Iris on the television. And she is in a commercial telling you that everything's going to be okay. Save us, you know, BP's your savior. We're going to fix this. And that commercial costs more than you made this year, and you made last year, and you probably make the next year. And every time you come home and turn your television set, it's on. I lived in Florida during this time frame. Non-stop. These things were non-stop. And it doesn't end. Corporations have horrible memories. If BP didn't have such a horrible memory, maybe they would have remembered the oil refinery they had in Texas a couple years previous. A refinery blew up in Texas. 15 people were killed. OSHA came in and said BP is basically a highly unsafe company. You know who they trotted out there in that black community? Iris. Same person. Okay? So tell me that public relations isn't being used corruptly there. Can you then stretch to say PR is evil? Well, certainly in these times I would say yes. Just yesterday, the CEO of BP before the World Petroleum Congress declared, quote, "Exploring for oil and gas has always been difficult, expensive, and full of risk. But we persevere because the people of the world need our product. We fuel rising living standards in regions such as the Middle East and Asia, where millions of people are being lifted out of poverty, at the same time as maintaining economic activity in countries that industrialized earlier. So refusing to explore is not an option. That would condemn humanity to a future of shortages, poverty, and conflict. To avoid that future, we must explore. I call it the exploration imperative, and it will probably be the greatest challenge our business faces in the coming decades. As budding scholars, how long would it take us to deconstruct that statement? Okay? How long would it take us to apply Mickey's sociodrama to that statement? He's making this like a race to the moon, exploring for oil, okay? Going around gobbling up the Earth's resources. And I'm not even making a statement about where you stand on the kind of the green scale, okay? So, profession versus discipline. For most people, profession equals vocation. Discipline equals methodology. And there's a deeper understanding. And you know what we do in education for undergraduates? We treat them like it's a trade school. In an undergraduate intro to PR class, you get maybe 1 week of history. And that history is full of, let's be nice, inaccuracies, overstatements, stretch. How much theory do you actually get? As little as the instructor can stand to teach you, in, I would say, 99% of the cases. Because you don't want your students to revolt. And as soon as students hear the word theory, 18, 19, 20, 21-year-olds, some grad students, no, none of you, but some grads. As soon as you hear the word theory, what happens? The top of your head explodes. Okay? So they don't want to hear that. So it's easier to teach somebody how to write a really good press release. Plus employees want that. They want our free interns to go out and write press releases for their company. Do you think they're not charging companies for that? That's not something I didn't even think of until right now. But true. So, we've talked about crises, and these are some things about the profession. Recently, the Public Relations Society of America decided to run a publicity stunt, in my opinion, called Public Relations Redefined, or Defined Initiative. They thought they would crowdsource the definition of PR and see what bubbled up to the top. Writing about this in the New York Times, columnist Stuart Elliott said on 11/20 that the reason for this, and he listed a long litany of crises. BP's mishandling of the incident in the Gulf. Facebook's hiring of public relations agency to try to generate articles that were anti-Google. How he even had something about chapstick, he had something about ads on Facebook pages, how Netflix lost so many customers in its flip-flopping, which we studied. When they talked to Rosanna Fisk, who is the chairwoman and CEO of the PRSA, she said, quote, "We felt we could no longer let it go." And then she says, quote, "My parents for the longest time have been trying to figure out what I do for a living," end quote, she added, laughing. That is funny, right? Hey mom, what's PR? Don't know. But you know your mom's thinking about Sex in the City, or, thank you for not smoking. Even if she doesn't say it. But how about this PRSA? How about building bridges to business leaders and faculty? Okay? How about help parents understand why it's okay for little Susie, or God forbid little Johnny, to study PR? How about trying to demonstrate how critical communication skills are central to organizational existence? Instead, with this initiative, PRSA would rather engage in an intellectual shell game. Okay? A publicity stunt rather than confronting the issues that really matter, like the fact, what's the number one concern for PR practitioners? they can't get a foot within the dominant coalition. Why not? Because business students don't know anything about PR. They're not taught. So there's an initiative, PRSA. Don't chuckle about the fact that your mom doesn't know what PR is. Fix the problem. Use your power to build bridges.